Firstly, thank you, Catherine. So it's my great pleasure to have this opportunity to comment and reflect some of my thoughts on complexity. So in a sense, Luohan Academy was born out of desire to try to understand complex problems. So Alibaba has long called for social scientists, economists, psychiatrists, historians to try to join us to conduct research. Ever after Alibaba started to try to build a dynamic digital platform or the so-called ecosystem, it finds that many problems that are difficult to solve. For example, how do you build a mechanism that can support all the agents that grow to have enjoy dynamic growth? What is the most effective way to connect the consumers and suppliers and to have a positive feedback to each other? So what is the role of information in this regard? What is the relative role of planning versus the natural emergence? So starting from that point, Luohan Academy was largely born out of this desire to help the society better understand and cope with the reality. Now, from complexity point of view, I believe digital revolution has a lot of implication for business. I'm going to talk about 5 points I think that are important. They include the changing definition and the boundary of a firm, timely trustworthy management of agents and their status, timely connectivity and communication between the agents, and the changing organization and management, and finally changing definition of risk and risk management. The last point is the focus of the speakers in this session, which I will dwell on that in the end. So let me talk about the first point, redefining a firm. Now, traditionally, we've been thinking that a firm is like an independent institution that aims to achieve its own goals, such as making money. But more and more, we find that we can better define firm using the concept of niche, which emphasizes on the interactive nature. So several of the speakers already mentioned this. A firm is more like a co-evolving network. So a firm, it cannot just think on its own. It has to respond, have a lot of the response, receiving signals from its environment, from policies, from economies, from the society trends and the technology, and try to make the right response. And so more generally, there's a rising trend in the business is called ESG, environmental, society, and governance. And in nature, that is trying to define the value of a firm from the society's perspective. And the firm has to define its value in this way and respond in this way. So I think that is really in the sense of this co-evolving system. Let me take one example. It's from one famous tech company, and we all know that companies, but I'm going to just skip it and just look at how it's claiming its pledge to battle the climate change. It says that climate change are the most significant technological and societal transformation in this century. So this must be a decade of ambition and paired with actions. So I appreciate urgency, responsibility, and opportunity ahead. We want to become the leading technology provider of sustainable solutions. So in this way, you can see that firms nowadays look at the society's challenges and try to become valuable by solving society's problems. And that's in essence of ESG, that is in essence of an ecosystem. Now, the second point I want to talk about is the timely connectivity and communication to generate feedback loop between the consumers and producers. Now, traditionally, we call the firms are more like the B2C, business to consumers, but more and more they are more and driven by the consumers. That is the feedback loop between the consumers and the producers. We do not know where's equilibrium, but we know that a firm can be much more agile, valuable by respond quickly to actually measure what the consumers wants. So measurement is science, is theory. Measurement is action. So we can do that by to have the response. So we're seeing a lot of that in reaction, and so the consumers, they become your fans, they become your designers, and they can even become your salesmen. They talk to each other, they help you to sell your products. And another example is the metaverse. We've been talking about this. It has a lot of it's trending these days, but I think besides the game itself, but I think a very important spirit of the metaverse is that it's not a traditional game in which you actually going to play it. Actually, in the modern metaverse, everybody becomes a builder, a participant in this. So more and more, we are blurring the boundary of a firm. We interact with each other. We get the consumers becomes the builders, designers, a part of the firm. Now, the first point I want to say how, from complexity point of view, the business is being changed in the digital age is that we can see that the firms, the supply chains are become more agile and smart, enabled by digital technology. Now, this is not new. If we look at going back, look at the United States history, the rise of the modern business, it was largely due to two things. One is something called a cable, which bring us information. And a second part is a train, give us the logistic power. And when we have the cable now, then we have the futures exchange in the 19th century. And that the rise of the future exchange is no different from today's manufacturing according to the sales. Now, we have the sales because we have information. Now we start to have the very agile supply chain very quickly. Now, let me give you, so that give rise to the retail brands in the 19th and 20th century. They, on the one hand, they connect to the consumers. On the other hand, they try to rebuild the supply chains to make it respond quickly to the consumer's needs. And that is no different from what we observe these days, the rise of the modern day digital retailer. We see a lot of the cases across the world. In China, there's one company called Xiaomi. It's a smartphone provider. It sells smartphone relatively cheaply, but on its e-commerce platform, it sells a lot of the products. On the other hand, it actually try to invest or cooperates with the suppliers, to have the high quality goods. So you can see that this kind of positive feedback loops or adaptive systems happening a lot thanks to the digital technology. Another example is what Alibaba has is called the Xinyu Smart Manufacturing System. Now, or the HIPRO, Smart Manufacturing System. Essentially, it digitizes the whole entire garment industry from design to production within 2 or 3 weeks. Traditionally, if you want to prepare the garments for let's say Christmas, you have to start to prepare this in spring, and you have to guess what's the trend this year, and what the consumers wants, like after half a year. So inventory is a huge cost for the garment industry, but nowadays you can actually do this within several weeks, within a month. So that's the power of the information. We know, and you think about it, a huge problem of this complexity world is the asymmetric information. We don't know the agents, we cannot react to them. Now we can do a lot more. So I think a huge part of this, the information revolution plays a huge role in reducing the challenge of this complexity world. The fourth point I want to bring up in business is the changing of the future of the work. Now we call this hybrid work. Now, after the COVID, we can see that as a lot of more remote, the home officing, office work at home now. But traditionally, we have to stay in the office because it's very hard to measure everybody's work in a timely, precise, transparent, and trustworthy fashion. But nowadays, actually, we're seeing this more and more. So in that way, then the digital technology can liberate a lot of those knowledge workers, like many of us, the academics are used to. So I think that is liberating the workforce, and that is the huge part of the future of the work. We can work independently, we collaborate independently, break the traditional boundary of time and location. And for example, in Microsoft Teams, it says that, wow, we're seeing a huge opportunity like the Windows before. Teams it wants to be the operating system, to be for the platform for the collaboration, and thanks to the digital technology. So that's changing how we work and collaborate in the future. And finally, the point the several brilliant speakers talk about and may come to this subject is the changing risk management. I'm going to talk about a couple of cases. One is the case of COVID. Several of you already brought this up earlier. Now, is COVID a systematic risk or is it not? Is it externality, or is it endogenous? Is this something we can actually mitigate, or have to just think about, wow, it's very connected, we just have to really control it as a static thing? Well, if you think about it, actually, if we can measure, we can do a bottom-up measurement science. If we have the technology, we can identify the cases, we can isolate them, then we can do a lot to stop the disease from spreading, the virus. So you can see it's not. So what is systematic risk? Well, it's actually very endogenous. You see it feedback. It's like the butterfly effect, right? We affect each other from locally. So if you can identify the risk, the atoms, that you can do a lot more in a dynamic way. So in this way, we are redefining, or at least minimizing somehow the systematic risk. And so that's the last point I'm talking about. The previous speakers are talking about the interconnected, complicated way, complex way of the network risk, like financial risk. I have no problem with that, but I'm going to try to talk about the other side of this, that actually with the measurement, with the digital technology, we can do it in other ways. It's something called real-time financial risk management. It's no different from how the suppliers respond to the consumers. No different from how, if we can identify the individual COVID cases, we can stop it, become more systematic. And giving you a couple of cases here is that, and it's also some work I'm working with my colleagues and with some colleagues at BIS. And so you can see that actually from the MyBank data, actually you can think about this. In finance, we know this concept called value at risk. So it's essentially we're assuming some kind of distribution. We calculate our risk exposure, then we ask for the capital to coverage. That's how it goes. That's one legitimate way of dealing with it. There's other ways. For example, how about you can quickly get the risk exposure quickly? You can change your risk exposure, the amount of the loan you're lending, the people you are lending, you quickly adjust your exposure. You can quickly change your distribution. And you can in that way, actually, you can have a dynamic real-time financial management. I think that's one way to do it. Another way is I'm thinking about is the algorithm. Now, the algorithm can be interconnected because a lot of people can have a similar algorithm, and we've seen that in the financial market. But another way to do it, actually, you can have certain mechanism, actually have design, have some kind of decentralized decision making. That's a little bit like the logic of the cloud computing. It's centralized by design, but it's decentralized by use. So but in that way, the risk is decentralized. So that can also be applied in financial risk management. Now, and that is some data here. You can see that for the My Bank, because it deals with the people or those SMEs with very little credit profile. So it's actually pretty risky, but you can see that the risk, the delinquency rate is being low. It's much lower than a lot of the customers from the big banks. And even after during the financial crisis period, it quickly goes down. And because it adjusts its risk exposure very quickly. Now, so let me summarize what we have learned from complexity from for modern business in the digital era. I fully agree with the great speakers before that. This is we have to look at, think about the world in a complexity way. And we have learned that agents differ and their interaction matters a lot. So that is great. Now, but what I'm emphasizing here is that the digital technology, or the information revolution, can change this a lot. Well, we have a lot of agents that are different, but then we can have much quicker, and the better measurement of what they want and what their status. So that is changing a lot of the modern business. It's changing the definition and the boundary of the firm. It's changing the relation between producer and consumers and the ability of the value chain. It's changing how we as knowledge workers work and we coordinate. It's changing risk management. So let me finish my comment in this way. I think in the complexity, vitality, or the massive vitality of the business world, the way we perceive and deal with the world matters. So is the power of information revolution.